This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. This episode is brought to you by BNC Pro, the brand spanking new digital wealth platform featuring an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional-grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. Yes, research, chart, screen, analyze, optimize, report, and more. BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for individual or enterprise use. Streamline your workflow, manage your crypto, and master this brave new asset class your way with BNC Pro. Go to bnc-pro.com now to create your free account, or just look for the link in the show notes to this episode. Now, on with the show. My guest today is Eden Dhaliwal. Eden is the Global Managing Director at Conflux Network, a high-performance Layer 1 blockchain protocol designed for scalability, security, and extensibility for the next generation of decentralized applications and Web3. Conflux team says it is the most endorsed DLT project in China, and I'm sure we'll talk about what that means. Welcome to the show, Eden.
Thanks, Andy.
So, Eden, you're actually a bit of a veteran of both crypto and the wider tech world, I suppose. So prior to joining Conflux, you're a partner at Outlier Ventures. And while you're at Outlier, I think you focused on crypto tokenomics. And I believe you're still an advisor for Outlier, which is really just Outlier is a VC firm. To begin with, why don't you just touch on your background and your time at Outlier?
Sure. So my background is in early stage venture development, mainly as a incubator and investor. Before joining Conflux Network, as you mentioned, I was a partner at Outlier Ventures, a leading European investor in Web3 infrastructure and decentralized data economies. And Outlier, essentially, I was building the crypto economics practice there, which was a practice with the purpose of doing investment due diligence, advising crypto economics, and go-to-market for our portfolio. And it was through this work that I basically set up a network of academics that were supporting this practice, and ended up bumping into Professor Fan Long of the University of Toronto, who is one of the founders of Conflux Network. And through these conversations with Fan, I learned that they were creating a breakthrough technology. And the more I learned, the more I was intrigued, and ended up joining their team this year to lead the global efforts.
Fantastic. We'll talk about Conflux very soon, and interested by what you mean when you say breakthrough technology. But I think this all ties together, right? And what I mean by that is the Outlier thesis, I think, is described as convergence. And you guys, you talk about the convergence stack, right? So I think that's just a nice way to open up the conversation. So do you want to explain what the convergence stack is?
Sure. So at Outlier, there was a thesis that was constructed actually pretty early on in 2015, 2016. Very much the pioneers of what was called the convergence thesis. So convergence is basically the hypothesis that there are new data economies, new opportunities, marketplaces that could be derived from the intersection of blockchains and other emerging tech like AI, IoT, AR, VR, etc. And so supporting these new data economies would be this Web3 infrastructure, obviously with a layer 1 blockchain at the first layer, and then a series of technologies in between that would kind of create the backbone for developers to create marketplaces, applications, etc. And so we've been investing in infrastructure. We've been also very interested in new business models around data. We see it as sort of the next evolution of the web and how business will be done.
That's exactly right. And obviously there are a lot of different, I guess, VC firms and other entities in the space that are all heading in the same direction. Really, it's about building out Web 3.0, and there's different ways of describing that. And yeah, the convergence stack is certainly one of them. Interesting then. So to kind of cross the chasm, if you like, to get to Web 3.0, there's different technology protocols that are needed, and look, as you pointed out, layer one blockchains are certainly one of them. Tell us about Conflux then. So what is Conflux?
So Conflux is a powerful, highly secure layer one blockchain that could deliver several thousands of transactions per second, and is also built to be developer friendly. And so Conflux was born out of the labs of Tsinghua University, which is kind of the Harvard MIT of China, and led by Turing Award winner Dr. Andy Yao, and has since expanded to a pretty amazing team of engineers, computer scientists from Tsinghua and University of Toronto. And so Conflux started as a research project, but over time became more ambitious, and the idea of Conflux was to, basically launch a global network. And so we raised $35 million in 2018 in the middle of the crypto winter. Lucky enough to have investors like Sequoia, Metastable, Baidu Ventures, Huobi. And, I think the hallmark of Conflux is not just the breakthrough technology, but also the trust that we've built in the China market and how we went about launching this project. So we worked very closely with regulators to do a regulatory compliant issuance. And since then, we've been able to build a relationship with the government, with regulators, with industry, where we've received basically the only state endorsement for a public blockchain from Shanghai state government, that is. We've now also received funding from the Shanghai state government, where we have used that funding to sort of create a research institute examining public blockchains, and further funding to sort of enable use cases and applications on our network.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds interesting, and I want to come back and dig into the China stuff a little bit. But I think first off, Eden, we better just explain this, because you've mentioned a couple of times the breakthrough technology that underpins the Conflux network. So when you say breakthrough technology, what are you referring to there?
Yeah, so in a traditional blockchain structure, like Bitcoin, the longest chain rule is used to determine the main chain. Essentially, all the fork blocks get discarded and don't affect the long chain determination. And so the transactions from these forked blocks aren't recorded, and so the miners don't get rewarded. And furthermore, I would say the computing power that was invested doesn't contribute to the security or the throughput of the system. So in our case with Conflux, what we've done is we've combined the benefits of both a blockchain, a POW blockchain, and a directed acyclical graph into what we refer to as a tree graph consensus protocol. And so this tree graph protocols are able to deliver, thousands of transactions per second. It's also able to reduce the transaction fees to less than 1% of the fees in Ethereum. And really the key breakthrough is that Conflux is able to optimistically process concurrent blocks without discarding any as forks.
We're starting to get a little bit technical, but yeah, so, and I've taken this from either from the white paper or the website, but you say, yeah, Conflux unleashes the potential of blockchain consensus protocol to break the current scalability limitation exhibited in systems such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, while still providing the strong security guarantee of a proof of work blockchain. And so the key enabler technique, you say, is a novel DAG-based ledger structure together with an optimistic concurrency control to achieve a consistent order of transactions among all the nodes on the network. So it sounds interesting, and to me it sounds, maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit, but we've heard this before from, new projects that come along and they say Bitcoin will never be anything apart from digital gold because it can only process 7 transactions a second, and while that may be okay for digital gold or for hodling, it's no good for Web3 style transactions, right? And so projects such as yourself, and another good example I think is Hedera Hashgraph, right? Their consensus algorithm is maybe not the same as yours, but it's similar, and it's got that sort of tree-like graph, right? And so Hedera, we're talking about 100,000 transactions per second. And again, just being devil's advocate, this sounds amazing and it sounds great, but am I right in saying this is kind of slightly theoretical at the moment? Whereas in contrast to, Bitcoin is actually deployed in the wild in, extremely adverse conditions and has been battle hardened over its, 10 years of existence, and it actually is decentralized and running as expected. So yeah, I'm just trying to sort of put it in context. What would your take be?
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. The reason why, first of all, our mainnet is in September of this year, so we're not too far away, and we're in the middle of testnet right now, which is performing very well. And what I would say is that we look at POW as sort of a definitely a more proven blockchain architecture, right? And so you're right, Bitcoin has been out there for a while. It's I would sort of like look at it as like being like very anti-fragile, but I don't know if I would regard it as being a sort of an optimized blockchain for the world to use. So obviously Ethereum is doing their work, and a lot of their work is very promising and but yet experimental. And so on our end, we looked at POW as something that was fairly proven, and scalability being sort of the biggest issue right now in sort of bringing blockchain to real world use cases. We wanted to find a way to kind of bring scalability to while using a POW structure. And so that's why we kind of went about this, why we wanted to solve this problem. And that's why we think it's an important problem to solve.
Look, Eden, I could not agree more. Anyone that can effectively solve that problem of having a blockchain that can scale to hundreds of thousands of transactions per second while still having something close to that proof of work style security, that's probably one of the most interesting problems to solve, right?
And if you look at, for example, Ethereum today, everybody is pretty excited about how Reddit is going to try to migrate and use the Ethereum protocol, but it remains to be seen, like if that all of that if the scalability is there to take all of those transactions. And so the way to look at Conflux is a bit like almost like looking at cities, right? Ethereum is kind of like New York. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of networking, but it's also very congested, very expensive. And Conflux is a place where you can move fast. It's going to be cheap and with very little congestion. So I think it'll be very attractive for specific use cases and specific markets. And at the same time, we're trying to build that sort of compatibility with other blockchains at an interoperability level and also at a smart contract composability level.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that then, Eden, because that's really interesting, and that's one of the big narratives that's happening in the crypto ecosystem at the moment is really the rise of DeFi, right? Decentralized finance, and DeFi is certainly having a big moment at the moment. There's a lot happening, and there's a lot of interest in DeFi, and of course one of the I guess the the main components of DeFi is this composability, right? This modularity, the protocol Lego, money Lego, and so how does Conflux operate in that sort of decentralized finance world where everything is these kind of building blocks that can interconnect with each other?
Right. So Conflux is Solidity compatible. What we're trying to do with Conflux is actually the way we look at DeFi is how do we create liquid markets, right? How do we create liquidity, the free flow of assets between blockchains, across jurisdictions, from centralized to decentralized systems. And so we spent a fair amount of time building a cross-chain protocol where assets will be able to flow freely between blockchains. We think, this type of infrastructure where assets can flow freely are going to enable DeFi within the crypto world, but also be able to supply new financial infrastructure for institutional eventually, and we also think that there's a lot of opportunities in emerging markets where we want to basically see DeFi applications. We've got some team members in Africa and Southeast Asia, and we're really looking to just develop our platform, our protocol as a facilitator of liquid markets. So whether it's at the whether it's with emerging markets or institutional or within blockchains, what we're really trying to do is create these liquid markets.
Reminds me a little bit of a quote that I saw on your Twitter, Eden. Well, he's always been a favorite of mine, Mr. Buckminster Fuller, who said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. If you want to change something, you need to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And that's, it's quite a famous quote, I guess, but it's quite a nice way of describing everything from DeFi to Web 3.0 or, whatever the new generation digital economy is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly the way I look at this space is that we are creating a new system. I think at this point, I wouldn't go so far as to say that we're creating a new system that's replacing the old system, right? But we're definitely living in a world where we need a two-tier system. We need an option from what the economic systems, the social systems that are sort of failing us, especially over the last 15 years. You can see now with the financial crisis a decade ago, and COVID now, that the systems that we're relying on are not serving us very well. And so I think having a two-tier system where people have options to opt into is going to lead to a world where hopefully over time, make the current systems obsolete.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's certainly an interesting time, and be interesting to watch this play out. But I think one of the criticisms that people have about DeFi is that at the moment DeFi is primarily used by insiders and enthusiasts and traders and speculators, really, and so they're just kind of speculating on crypto itself or the DeFi tokens. Just because you have a little bit of a background yourself as a token economics guy, be interested to just hear any sort of your top line thoughts on DeFi tokens, because it must be it's a kind of an interesting time, because ICO tokens were one thing, but that was 3 years ago now. But DeFi tokens, sort of an order of magnitude more interesting as their economies are real and functioning, even at this sort of nascent early stage, right?
Yeah, I think, what's good about where we are now is that, with ICOs, I think there were a lot of protocols that launched that couldn't, that didn't actually have demand side figured out, right? So they would create crypto economics, a technology, and sort of this this utopian system, but there was actually no demand actually delivered, and not a lot of interfacing with a customer or a user. So now with DeFi, I mean, there seems to be very clear, obviously value propositions, yields that users, customers can get. And that's also enabling us to kind of figure out some user experiences. So I think DeFi right now is moving us in crypto economic design into a place where we're able to actually start to test a little bit more around what is the actual go-to-market for a crypto economy. I think previously it was very difficult to create a product or some intrinsic value that was going to facilitate the testing, the sort of creation of a crypto go-to-market strategy. But you're starting to see now with something like Compound, create a product, build a community, and then kind of, give the governance to that community, right? And then launch a token. And you're starting to see sort of like this formula build now. So I think that's very promising.
Yes, I think it's very promising too. And again, just to have to wait and see how this plays out. Look, let's bring it back to Conflux. I said we'd talk about the China connection. And so you mentioned before, I think there was... Am I right in saying that Conflux is actually based in Beijing? Is that correct?
Yeah, so the project was born out of Beijing. Now, at this point, we have a center and some facilities in Shanghai, and we also have our global office. It's actually a distributed team, but
sure,
sort of out of Toronto.
Okay, sure. So, and you said there was, so you mentioned Shanghai, and I think you mentioned a partnership with the Shanghai Municipal Science and Technology Commission. That's what I've got here in my notes. So, yeah, I'm interested in what that means because, obviously with China has a long-standing association, if you like, with Bitcoin and with crypto. A lot of the Bitcoin mining obviously takes place in China, and we've seen various statements from, I guess, the Chinese ruling party about their potential interest in blockchain. So yeah, what is this partnership with the Shanghai Technology Commission? What does that mean?
So it's not a partnership. It's I think probably what's most important to know is that the Shanghai Municipal Commission is actually, the Shanghai state government. And so they have endorsed Conflux. And I think that's very notable because there's a great reluctance by Chinese governments to back public permissionless networks. And that's for a variety of reasons. One is there's sort of a lack of understanding of what open networks are. And the second is there's a lot of frowned upon sort of history, from the ICO era, right? Where
sure.
networks would launch without like really any transactions and just purely like in a very speculative market. So I think that's an important sort of milestone for us because it puts us in the position of sort of leading the case for public permissionless networks in China. And the landscape in China, actually, there's been a lot of exuberance around the national blockchain strategy that was sort of announced late last year. And there's been a lot of activity. There's been a lot of funds that have been sort of allocated. But those funds are not sort of centrally administered. Those funds go to states, and then states actually choose the strategy, choose the projects to which they want to back. And so what's resulted is that the China landscape is sort of filled with a lot of enterprise and private blockchain projects at the moment. And so like all over the news, you'll hear about, the DCEP, this digital yuan project. You'll hear about BSN. You'll hear about, various sort of Alibaba, Baidu chains. And you don't hear so much about the public chains, the previous public chains like Neo and Ontology, for example. And so what's happened is that the market has gotten like highly fragmented. And as I mentioned, sort of focused on sort of private and enterprise. So it really, in a lot of ways, puts us in a very distinct position of leadership to represent and build the business case for public blockchains to the China market.
Yeah, it's really interesting what's happening in China, and I suppose from the outside, it's quite difficult to understand because I imagine it's very nuanced or fragmented is the word that you used, and I guess from a kind of the really high level, China has this strategic plan, and Chinese government is obviously very good at, I guess, strategy, and they are willing to look 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future, perhaps a little bit longer than some Western governments have traditionally been able to do. But I guess what I'm saying is, they really look at blockchain as a strategic technology pillar. And I remember, I don't know if you know who Matthew Graham is from Sino Capital, but I had him on the podcast earlier this year, and he's based in China, and he had a great way of explaining this. And he basically said, in China it's blockchain, but it's not blockchain as we understand it in the West. It's blockchain with Chinese characteristics. So there's certainly no libertarian beliefs or anything like that. It's about driving pure efficiency at scale to produce innovation.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there isn't a high degree of sort of ideological belief behind blockchain technology in China. It's very pragmatic. How can we use this to sort of facilitate industry, build new business cases? I also think that the China market is also very nuanced at the developer level. I think there's a belief, maybe a Western belief, that crypto networks are built bottom up, and a lot of it based on sort of this hacker culture. But I think when you spend time in China, you start to understand that the developers there have different archetypes, and the hacker culture isn't as strong, and so there's sort of this mix of like top-down approach that sort of pushes things along with some of the cultural values that are distinct, that need to be accounted for in order to kind of launch a blockchain network there, and especially a public blockchain.
Yes, indeed. Well, really, really interesting thoughts, Eden. Look, just before we go to a break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the Crypto Conversation hot take round. So, just closing thoughts on Conflux. Just wrap this up for us. What's happening at the moment for the Conflux Network, and what's on the roadmap? What's coming next for the rest of 2020?
So we're currently in our testnet phase. We're in the second phase towards mainnet, which is in September of this year. We're currently in the middle of sort of rolling out our mining, and we'll be integrating our POW algorithm soon. In the meantime, what we've been concentrating on is various initiatives to and partnerships around DeFi and around helping other networks understand and break into the China market. So a lot of partnerships around that, and I think once we hit mainnet in September, I think you'll start to see a lot more initiatives around developer and initiatives around facilitating new applications.
Brilliant, Eden. Well, we will look forward to seeing how that all rolls out. Let's go to a very quick break and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the Crypto Conversation Hot Take Round.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
All right, so we're back and I'm with Eden Dhaliwal. He is the general manager at the Conflux Network. Eden, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Sounds good.
All right, I just want your hot takes, your hot fire. Take your best shot. Here we go. Eden, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
I'm a long-termist, so multi-coin opportunist for me.
Yes, I would have been surprised to hear anything different. Eden, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Crypto networks are not winner-take-all, and several networks can coexist together.
Very nicely said. I increasingly think that is probably the case. I ask every guest this question, Eden. It's going to get contentious, but who do you think wins the American presidential election 2020?
I think Trump will win, and I think there'll be some sort of Gore-Bush type of controversy. I think it'll get really ugly.
Yes, I think that sounds about right. Okay, Eden, Bill Gates famously said, "We tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. What do you think the blockchain space looks like in 10 years' time?
I think Gen Z is growing up with Bitcoin. I think central bank digital currencies and Libra will push mainstream adoption.
Fantastic. I hope so. Eden, sci-fi author William Gibson said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Streaming health data. It'll seem really archaic to future generations that we have to get sick before we go to the doctor.
Yeah, I think I love that. I think that's a great answer. And look, Balaji on Twitter, he talks a lot about this stuff at the moment. You know, in the context of COVID, if everyone had no reason why we can't hook up all our devices and our watches, and they could be providing good early warning indications of where COVID hotspots are, for one example, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Eden, let's zoom out though. What do you think is the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I think human ingenuity will prevail, so I'll say utopia.
I love it. All right, finally, Eden, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
I'm not a huge sci-fi guy, but I'll say Interstellar. The movie a few years ago.
Yeah. Nice. A great film. Christopher Nolan classic. Excellent. Hey, well, Eden, thank you so much for talking to us today. Nothing else to say except the microphone is yours. Please take us out. Please tell the people where they can go to find you on your various platforms and where they can go to find out more about the Conflux Network.
Sure. So you could find me at Twitter at Eden Dhaliwal, and you can find the Conflux find out more about the Conflux project at confluxnetwork.org or on Medium.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks very much, Eden. All the best.
Thanks, Andy.
Boom. There you go. That was today's episode. Don't forget, the Crypto Conversation is sponsored by BNC Pro, the digital wealth platform featuring an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional-grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for individual or enterprise use. Just go to bnc-pro.com and you can create your free account. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. See you real soon. See you next time. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.